There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining in. We're going to give it just another couple of moments as people are logging in and getting their sound working for themselves. But thanks so much for taking time to join in here with us today for our first Sana Sana con SHPE. And we'll get started here in just a moment. As you're getting settled, just know that the chat feature is open. So as we dig into this content and conversation, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the chat. I don't know about you all. I can't even count how many Zoom events I've attended, and some of the best Zoom events that I've attended are when the participants all engage in the chat, right? If you have a thought, if something strikes you that's being said that like, wow, that really resonates with me, you don't have to have a question. You can have a thought or a comment that might help someone else too. So as participants, we just encourage you to engage in that chat. And I'll ask you as we're kind of getting settled here to just quickly, if you don't mind, tell us where you're joining from. I'm joining from Kansas City, Missouri. Where's everybody else joining from?
I'm joining from Akron, Ohio.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to keep letting people in as we get going. My name is Susan and I work for SHPE, and I'm going to pass the baton over to one of our Honeywell partners in this, Carolina, and she's going to get us started.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Buenas tardes, good afternoon, wherever you're coming from. I'm just so happy to be kicking off this first of a couple of webinar series where we will be discussing the topic of mental health. And given that this month of May we are celebrating bringing awareness to this subject, I am very happy to be having this space where we can all come together, share, and be educated on some of the tools and resources that we can use in light of mental health. And so a little bit of background. My name is Carolina Llano. I work at the Honeywell site of Puerto Rico as a Hispanic and former undergrad. I used to attend SHPE events when I was in college, and this was one of the reasons that stood out to me when I heard that Honeywell and SHPE had a partnership going on. And so I was more than happy to get involved specifically in this subject of mental health. I think it is very important. It is something that should be discussed between all ranges, whether it's age and whether whether you're a young adult, whether you're a professional. I think this is something that could affect us all. And right now, here we're joining to be educated and talk about some of the tools and the simple fact of us sharing and coming up with any questions that we might have, any experiences, and getting to know each other is something that really catches my attention when it comes to these projects that can just connect us all as a community. And so I am passing the baton over to Gustavo Molinari, where he will be leading us through today's discussion.
Thank you, Carolina, and thank you, SHPE, and to Honeywell for having me. It's really great that we're having more discussions around mental health and how to take care of ourselves, but also take care of our others, especially if they're in distress, or if we can notice the early warning signs of distress so that they get the help that we need. So I'll be sharing my screen and I'll introduce myself. I have a slide where I have information about me, so I'll introduce myself in just a bit. So if you are here for a Mental Health 101 conversation, you're in the right place. So we'll go ahead and get started. Some things, like I'll mention that in a minute, but we're going to talk about mental health in general, what is mental health, defining, having a shared definition, some statistics, especially around Latino mental health or Hispanic mental health, and then talk about how to take care of yourself before it becomes an issue. But if it does become a problem, how to get help or refer someone to help. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And so as we begin, of course, here we'll also we're going to be talking about mental health, like I said. And so please take care of yourself and reach out to others. So you can reach out to Susan or to Carolina, and we'll get you some support if you need it, if some feelings come up. Please also, we're going to be interacting. So feel free, Susan was saying this in the beginning, but use the chat feature, the react buttons. I'll ask also for some participation in the Mentimeter, which is a tool. So have your phone or your computer browser handy for a word cloud that we'll create together. And so, so that's what we'll get started. So like I mentioned, I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and that's where I'm based now, back here in Texas. And I'm a first-generation American and student, and I think that really played into my own journey in mental health, understanding what it was. Both of my parents were born in Mexico, and so a lot of the messages that I received around what mental health was right, we don't actually talk about it, or if there's something going on, here, have some food and cheer up and you'll get better. And so those were some of those conversations. I know that's sometimes very stereotypical, but that was something that I grew up with. And so that's something that I try to combat and reduce stigma on. And so that's how we start by doing that, is having conversations such as this one. So you'll see here that you see me here with some friends. At one of my first 10Ks, I do enjoy kind of being active and being with friends. And then my dog, although he's very small here, here he is. He's a California dog, so he actually moved back with me as my professional career went on. He moved back with me. So that's how I take care of myself. And we'll talk about self-care, but I would love to see in the chat how you take care of yourself, what you enjoy doing, or what brings you joy in life here. So, like I said, I wanted to start off by having a conversation about what does mental health mean to you. So I'm going to share another screen here, and then we'd love for you to either go to menti.com, or you can scan the QR code and it'll take you to the link directly. But let us know, what does mental health mean to you? Or also, to frame it a different way, maybe what were some things that you heard growing up? All right, great. I like kind of these word clouds to kind of see what we have, as well as some of the things that we again resonate, right? So as if you start putting the same word, it'll start growing, right? So right off the bat, I see wellness, balance, how you view the world, connectedness, stress, peace, resilience, something that is part of oneself. Paz eterna, I saw it as it's moving, mindfulness, self-care, something tough. So that's something that comes with mental health, asking for help, locus of control, comfort. So those are all great things that come to mind with mental health when we talk about mental health. I see here also in the chat, as we were talking about self-care, right? Doing meditation, being with the puppy, running, yoga, hikes and gym. And so those are all great things. And I'm glad that you're able to take care of yourself, or hopefully find some time for yourself. So thank you for participating in that. So we'll come back to this Mentimeter, but I wanted to ask what y'all thought about what mental health was. I know that you probably have already had exposure around mental health, but wanted to have kind of a shared definition, or what the group thought about what mental health was. So here is a definition. So this comes from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. So SAMHSA, if you heard it that way. But it says mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. and helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices, right? So again, in the chat, what stands out to you here in this definition? To me, it's about it encompasses your emotional and your social well-being, right? So if you are mentally well or have good mental health, everyone has mental health here, you're able to relate to others. And we know from research that social connectedness is a protective factor of suicide, right? So it reduces risk of suicide or reduces risk of getting physically sick. And so those are, it's really important to understand that, mental health affects your emotional and your social well-being as well. I also think it here, again, the stress and how we make choices, right? So a lot of y'all are professionals or joining from a professional setting. And I know that a lot of times when we are stressed at work, it kind of transfers into our personal life after we leave the workplace, however that way may be. And it also affects how we make decisions at work or how we make decisions for ourselves. And so it's important to kind of understand what mental health encompasses, and that it does encompass a lot of that for here. Now, we also sometimes conflate it or kind of confuse it with mental conditions, right, or mental illness. So here the definition is mental illness are disorders ranging from mild to severe that affect a person's thinking, mood, and or behavior. And according to the National Institute of Mental Health, nearly 1 in 5 adults live with a mental illness, right? So I know that mental health is always kind of seen negatively, right? I even sometimes still slip up and say good mental health, bad mental health, but in reality, we all have mental health, period, right? But commonly in society, we think about mental illness, mental conditions as only mental health. And so I like to use the analogy that when we talk about physical health, everyone has physical health. We need to take care of our physical body. We go to the doctor. But cancer, right, is something that does affect a lot of adults. I think now the updated statistic is that 1 in 2 right now would get cancer. And so, cancer does not define entirely your physical health, but it is a condition that you could have. So similarly, mental health is something that everyone does have, and it also impacts our physical health or is part of our overall well-being, as some of you pointed out in your definition or the word cloud that we had. But it's important to understand that it is not only mental illness is part of mental health. To put it another way, right, I like to share this graphic, or it's a really good graphic. And the Steve Fund is an organization that supports students of color, primarily in college settings. And so definitely check them out if you have a chance. But this is what is mental health, right? It's intrinsically linked to physical health, as I show, or as you may understand, that when you don't feel well emotionally, your mood is impacted. And so you don't want to get out of bed. You start making poor decisions, things like that. It's on a continuum too, right? So some days you're going to be thriving. You're going to feel that it's the perfect day and you won the lottery. Maybe you did and don't want to tell us, that's fine. Or it goes all the way to, again, mental illness, or you're having a horrible day. And so that's, we don't feel well. So it's definitely on a continuum. It's complex, right? So I know for myself, I am feeling good right now, but I'm also kind of feeling gloomy at the same time. It's actually, I'm in Houston, and so we're getting really bad rain. There's flooding and kind of thinking about those things. So there's always a lot going on. Or we may present one way at work and something else is going on at home, right, in their personal life. And so those are all things that make it very complex. Or we have, again, multiple conditions similarly to physical health, and how we may have multiple disorders or multiple conditions. Similarly, in mental health, there are many things going on that in some ways you may, again, be doing well, in others, it's not. Obviously, it's a part of being a human and something we need to look after. It can be both positive and negative. It is changeable, of course. It's work make time for, right? So it's not, as we talk about self-care and making time for yourself, it's very important that you do, right? Whether it's 5 minutes at the end of a meeting, if you can, during the workday, 10 minutes or more, scheduling, making sure that you actually schedule and take your lunch break, but also kind of checking in with yourself and saying, what do I actually need? What is going on? Why am I feeling this way? And checking in with ourselves. And then this is what is not part of mental health, right? So it's not a sign of weakness if we talk about mental health or asking for help. It's not all in your mind, right? Again, we talked about how it's manifests itself. Think about how sometimes when you're having a bad day, it also translates into bad sleep, and then it kind of is a continuous cycle of that. It's not shameful to ask for help or to talk about it or something to snap out of it. It's not necessarily fixed, right? So again, it does change. And again, it's not fake news or something that's not real, right? So, and that it's so complex that everyone is going to have a different experience, whether you're experiencing or whether you have the same condition or are experiencing similar things. Everyone will have a different experience in terms of their mental health. So I wanted to share some statistics, particularly around just general and then also for Hispanic Latinos. So here are some of the statistics, and I'll read them out loud. As you see the screen, though, I would love to see in the chat. Also, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like. What are some of the statistics that stand out? So I'll read them out loud here for accessibility. So 12.5% of the population in the US have feelings of worry, nervousness, or anxiety. 10 million Hispanic Latinos Americans have a mental illness. And I believe where I got this from, they were showing how it is very similar to the population in New York. So that is a very, think about that across the US and territories. 5% of the population have regular feelings of depression. 22% of Latinos, Hispanic Americans live with a mental illness too. So that's, again, kind of the 10 million, 22% of the Latino population. The 11th leading cause here in the US is suicide. So someone dies by suicide, and that's a very much leading cause. It is getting slightly better, but it kind of depends on what age range we're talking about. And then for Latinos, though, the third leading cause of death in suicide among Latino Americans that are aged 10 to 24 are dying by suicide. So that's the third leading cause. So think about 10 kind of being in fifth grade or so, all the way through 24. So that's like college, grad school, or the start of career. And so that I would say is very alarming here. Someone here, Carolina, you mentioned 10 million Latinx with mental illness, definitely, and I feel that that's something that we don't talk about enough, right? Another statistic, as we talk about mental health, and especially with Latinos, 36% of Latinx adults receive treatment. So they seek and receive the treatment for their mental conditions or mental illnesses, as opposed to 52% of their non-Hispanic white counterparts, right? So it's a very complex reason as to why maybe it's stigma, access to healthcare, and being able to pay for treatment or even knowing where to start for treatment. But you'll see it's a very much not everyone that does need treatment or receive any type of mental health care or behavioral health care receives that. So anybody else? I see here 5% regular feelings of depression. It seems very low, absolutely. And I would want to say that from this is, like Liliana was pointing out, this may be self-disclosed, or this is maybe gathered from doctors. When you go to the doctor, they have a screening that they do. So this may be gathered from that. And a lot of times we don't disclose, or we know how to kind of avoid the question or avoid the answers that will not screen us for that, right? So here, Dan in the chat also said that translating it to numbers, right, about 6.4 do not receive treatment. So I also think that that's alarming, right? Thinking about how Latinos are one of the largest populations here in the US. And so think about all that everyone is not receiving the treatment that they had. Any other thoughts or comments in relation to that? Here, another comment says, I believe most Latinos just don't have the support, especially from family that never taught them to express feelings. Absolutely. And that's actually what we'll discuss in the next section. So I have another Mentimeter here. So what did you hear about mental health growing up? So what messages, what were you told if you ever brought something up? Like I mentioned, when I thought about mental health, or I would say, hey, I'm not feeling well. Oh, just take a nap and you'll figure it out, right? So we'll take a few minutes and then go from there. Sorry about that. My computer decided to stop sharing the screen and kind of do a lot of different things, but some of the things here in the chat, I'm seeing it. If you weren't able to put it in the Mentimeter, échale ganas is definitely one, or ponte las pilas, right? So put on some batteries or just give a little bit more effort, and we'll be fine, right? So we don't talk about it. Some of the things here on this board, as you can see, don't show weakness as a man. Absolutely. I think there's a lot, especially with Latino men, or my experience. It's about being tough and making sure that we take care of others. What do you have to be sad about? Look at what we've given you, especially for first generation Americans, right? Or if your parents were born abroad, that's definitely a common kind of topic that comes about with us. Let's not talk about this team. No se habla de este tema. Don't show weakness. Be a good girl, right? So all about kind of complicity and kind of doing that. You never really heard about anything, right? So there's just no mention of it. Expressing your feelings are lies, and that getting help means that you're crazy. Absolutely. So that's es algo de locos, right? That's something. It's something that crazy people talk about. It'll all be better tomorrow, as if, closing our eyes and kind of opening is kind of like a movie, right? And things reset. So if it shows weakness to express yourselves, psychiatrists or psychologists are for crazy people. And so those are things to do that. Don't be complicated is definitely another message that we receive, right, growing up of, hey, like, you have so many things going on for you, or we've given you so much, we've sacrificed so much, and so those are just why are you being difficult? Absolutely. Well, great. Well, thank you for sharing, and I hope that for yourself or for your families, I know some here have mentioned that our parents or for each other are able to hold the space that you need to be able to voice your concerns. So, like you were mentioning with the statistics, I also wanted to expand more about our culture. So. Again, why don't we talk about mental health, right? So talking about some of the stigma, I think it comes back to our culture and values, right? There's a lot of pride in what we do, or that we want to show up for a certain way, especially, right? So understanding that being Latino, Hispanic here in the US is very complicated, and that we have to carry ourselves a certain way or feel that we have some burden, especially again for first-gen Americans, and kind of having the burden of being successful for our families, for ourselves. I'm also the firstborn, so I feel like this carry has extra pressure for me for that. And like someone posted here in the chat says that pride makes us stubborn. Absolutely. So even if you know that you need help, Susan and Carolina ourselves were talking about this right before we started this presentation. And so a lot of times we know that we need help, but we're hesitant to ask for it, right? So those are definitely things. Family, and thinking about how sometimes we also get the message that private things should stay within the family, so we don't seek help, or when we seek help we get these messages and then we start shutting down, right? So those are things that we don't talk about. And then tradition, of course, some things are just kind of carried over, and again, some of the competing needs and priorities. So someone talked about it's just too expensive, especially here in the US. It seems like some of us are even joining from internationally or have some international knowledge here, that others are able to receive free mental health care or can get at least some sort of access. And so definitely there are competing priorities. It may be too expensive, or we just don't prioritize it, right? We want to prioritize making sure that we have successful means, right, in terms of money, or that we have a roof over ourselves, which are definitely basic needs that we need to accomplish, but we kind of neglect our mental well-being. Religion and faith, of course, there's historically, right, for those that engage in religion, oftentimes in the church, we were taught that, come talk to us as the pastor or father, whoever the church leader is, and that's where it should end, right? So, or if you talk about it once, in confessions, if you were to do confessionals, and then that's where you'll leave it. Just by saying it once, things will get better, or just pray on it, right? Which is helpful. It is also similar to meditation, right? But that oftentimes that's where the conversation ended, and it never extended, or there was never any resources, and we look to our faith or God, or you were kind of being punished for something, right? So those are some of the traditional views, or some views that have also carried over or have been instilled in our culture. to continue, again, it is a complex matter, right? It's not just one thing or the other, but some of the things that kind of factor into why don't we talk about mental health is having lack of healthcare access. You saw here, or one of the statistics was around the percentage that we do need that do need treatment is very low compared to other counterparts. And so one of the reasons is that a lot of folks don't have health insurance, or the coverage is limited, right? So I know even as a professional that does have health insurance, at times I've seen in different work settings, it just does not cover, or there's still a copay. And so sometimes even that copay is a little bit too much for others. And so that's one of the reasons. Language barriers, right? So especially for those that primary language is Spanish, discussing mental health may not be something that comes up, or communicating the needs, right? So if you're only communicating Spanish and that healthcare professional speaks English primarily, and they don't understand what you're trying to say, that definitely becomes a barrier. Another thing, and I'll talk about seeking help and how you can make sure that you get culturally competent help, is expressing yourself. So I know for me, I'm also an English language learner, so Spanish was my first language. And so as you know, as you think about that voice in your head, that kind of a reason, or that you talk to yourself, mine's in Spanish most of the time, right? Or I know that feeling. I may not be able to have the word in Spanish or even in English, but I can express myself if I start talking about it in Spanish. I like to think about this as, if you know multiple languages, what is the language that you curse in when you hit traffic or something like that, right? Or you stub your toe or whatever. And so that's definitely something that comes up for many, especially English language learners, or those that speak Spanish, Portuguese, etc. First, right? That they're not able to explain their feelings to their healthcare professionals. And then lastly, another reason why we may not be talking about it, or that we may not be getting the care that we need, is misdiagnosis, and that there's a lack of cultural competence in our doctors, right? So they may not understand that what we're saying. Sometimes I feel too that we speak in indirect terms, right? We're trying to say one thing, but kind of meaning another, and so that we don't have to say everything directly. I've seen that in my experience with my family, or that we may say no, but in reality it's a yes. And so a lot of times doctors may not be able to understand that. So that's some of the reasons, or why it's complicated. And of course, as we try to reduce the stigma, that's definitely something that we should work on. So how do we reduce the stigma, right? Again, having conversations and kind of bridging the gap for others. I know that when I decided to major in psychology, my parents looked at me like, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to work with crazy people? Originally, I wanted to work in education, actually. And so my career has been all over the place in a way, but a lot of it has been in health promotion and mental health promotion. And so as I worked in another mental health nonprofit, in this one, and the one I currently work at, I've kind of had to explain to my parents, this is what we do, or this is what mental health is. And so kind of bridging the gap, and kind of rephrasing a lot of things for parents or for others, and doing the education, or sending them the right education too. We should also model behaviors and having these discussions too, right? So a lot of times I've seen in my own mentors, other supervisors and stuff, that they say, well, make sure you take care of yourself, take your vacation and do that. But it's important that they actually do it too, right? So when I supervise someone, I make sure that they know that I'm on vacation. I'm not going to respond when I am. I'm going to send them to the appropriate source. Or in my personal life, I bring up, oh, so sorry, I can't make dinner. I actually have a therapist appointment, or I am not feeling well and I just don't want to share. Not that you do have to share a reason why you can't join something, right? But it does help, and kind of gives people, oh, okay, he's taking care of yourself. And then just being open and honest, right, about mental health here. So absolutely, someone here in the chat said boundaries. I feel we're not taught healthy boundaries as well. So being able to say no, and saying that we don't do that. Absolutely. So taking care of you, right, and your mental health. So in the chat, or if anyone wants to unmute themselves, what are some ways that you take care of yourself? So I know we started that by kind of, some of y'all have said meditation, yoga, running. Are there other ways that you take care of yourself, or that you think about mental health? in terms of how you take care of your own mental health? Walking outside, especially at work, absolutely. And if you work in an office setting, right, it's very much you can be inside for the entirety of the day, or if you work from home, if you don't do something that day, which is very fine, but taking care of yourself and being able to go outside. So all those ways are great to do that. Um, Here I see I work with someone, a coach weekly, and so we eat healthy, journal, speak up when I need space, help, or just need venting session. Absolutely, those are all ways to take care of yourself. And so here I have self-care and maintenance strategies. And when I said I wanted to put maintenance in there, right, because as we think about that, self-care can sometimes be a very much band-aid approach, right? So we start thinking about self-care when we are not feeling well already. And so it's important that we are regularly taking care of yourself. So think about an analogy, not that we're cars, but right, that you have to take care of your car over the course of its lifetime, right? It's not just something that you do it, you have to change the oil, you have to change filters, you have to do this and that. But it's something to make sure that the car is running. So again, we're more complex than just than cars, of course, but it's important that we are taking care of ourselves over our course of our lifetime. So set and follow healthy routines, right? So that means sleep, moving. I didn't put exercise. It can just be simply moving if you can. Finding the support system. So again, finding a good support system can reduce the risk of suicide and can reduce a lot of our stress. We often share things with them. We're just being in the space with others. We are social beings, right? So we do need interaction with others. I put here unplugging. I feel more so here after the pandemic started that we do tend to be on the screen, right? Whether it's the small screen on the phone, the medium screen, which is a computer, or even a bigger screen, the TV or some sort of other screen, we're always kind of in the loop. And I know I found myself scrolling a lot, right? So it's something that it's fine for a little bit, but if you kind of scroll, we also start doing a lot of comparisons and things like that. So again, making sure that you unplug and do that part of your routine. Someone in the chat pointed out making sure that you do have boundaries with yourself. And so learning how to say no and not necessarily having to give a reason, but in just being able um, to ensure that we say no in terms of not being, can you attend this? No, right? Or if it's at work and if it's something that, hey, like I would love for you to join this committee or can you do that? Having hopefully an environment where you can say no, you're right, I'm over capacity, I don't have the time at the moment, or can we revisit this later, or can we have a conversation about that, right? So again, self-care is not just kind of taking bubble baths or things that we've been sold. Other things that you can do for self-care and maintenance is asking and accepting help and support, right? Again, a lot of times we know that we need help or that we should get help, but we don't know how to ask for help. Or if we do ask for help, a lot of times it's about knowing how to get the help and accept it, right? So this may look like a friend is offering you support and you're saying, oh, I don't need that. Or again, one of the examples that came up is kind of these students need help, they need additional resources, but they don't know if they should be asking or if that's a crisis or if it qualifies as something that needs support. So again, it looks different for everyone. And so again, taking time for yourself, including PTO and sick time, right? Or taking a mental health day as needed. And then gratitude and reflection, right? Understanding what you're grateful for, what happened during the day, what could you done better, or what did you do well that you want to replicate in the next few days. Any questions or comments around self-care or maintenance here?
Gustavo, there were a couple in the chat. I'm going to bring up one that was asked a little bit earlier in context of like, how do you get people to kind of open up, or like, what about someone who either they can't open up themselves or doesn't take your hand? And I don't know, Christian, if you want to unmute or say anything else about that question, but yeah, how do you help someone or help yourself if you can't open up?
just giving a moment in case they unmuted, but I would say definitely not giving up on this person, right? So if someone you're trying to get them the help or asking how they're doing, again, that consistency goes a long way. So we know that a lot of times that people, again, social connectedness can definitely reduce the risk of suicide. And so it's important that folks feel that they have someone to go to in case they need the support. And they just may not need it in the moment, right? So, and letting them get the help that they need when they need it, right? So you can't help someone that doesn't want to get help, but it's important that we definitely continue offering that support, which sometimes can be exhausting. So it's okay to also take a break from trying to support someone. And I would say that you can also bring things up indirectly, right? So again, when talking with my family around mental health, or oftentimes I'm not diving deep into mental health topics, or having set conversations around them as I would in work. But I do ask them, how is this going? Or, last time this happened in our family, and last time you mentioned this, it seemed like you were sad. What's going on? So kind of bringing it indirectly, again, sometimes having to talk about it indirectly, but that's some ways that you could talk about mental health for those that don't want to talk about mental health, or even, again, being consistent in offering the support, even if it's, how are you doing today? How are you really doing today? And continuing on and being consistent with that.
I love that. How are you really doing today? Rather than just the "I'm fine." There was also another question in the chat. How would we know when we should get help if we keep pushing it for another time?
Absolutely. So that's actually what we'll talk about next here. So I have a few items here in terms of, when is it time to seek help care? When is it time to seek help, and when self-care is just not enough, right? I'll say two things, right? So this is not an exhaustive list, and it looks different. Same thing with mental health, self-care. It looks different for everyone. So my tipping point may be different than Susan's or than Carolina and then others, right? And then also, I will say these are warning signs and symptoms of that you need to seek help for, either for yourself or for someone else. But it's similar if I were to say, do not look at red Toyotas today when you leave your house, right? If you go on a drive, or if you're out and about on your commute, don't look at red Toyotas. Then you're going to start noticing all the red Toyotas, right? So again, just because you see some of these warning signs doesn't mean that it's necessarily something, but it may be kind of a reminder to check in with yourself, or to kind of get help for someone. So these are some of the times to seek help, right? So again, when maintenance and self-care strategies are not helping, so when, again, those routines, especially with difficulty sleeping, right? If you know that your sleep, you don't have a sleep issue or problem that's been diagnosed, but it's something that kind of keeps coming up, and things like that. Changes in appetite or unplanned weight changes, difficulty getting out of bed in the morning because of their mood, and kind of that's consistent. Difficulty concentrating, loss of interest in things that you usually find enjoyable, right? So if your thing is gardening and planting, I bring that up because that's one of the things I do sometimes. And you just look at things, you're like, that's whatever. I don't care if my plants die, or it's not fun anymore, right? Loss of kind of inability to complete usual tasks and activities, right? So getting your coffee every day, and that's just kind of not something that you're able to do, or even sometimes getting out of bed is too much. Feelings of being irate, frustration, restlessness, and then any signs of distress of, you start feeling just agitated, and want to, you don't know how to feel, right? So either way, it's kind of the opposite spectrums, right? The really horrible and the really bad. So I'll use sleep, right? So oftentimes we think about, I work with college students, and so oftentimes with college students, you think about, oh, they're getting too little sleep, and so that's a sign of distress, right? Obviously, they're in college, they are stressed out, so that may be a sign of distress, or that it's time to seek help. But it can also be the opposite, right? So it could be that you're getting too much sleep. So instead of getting 7 to 9 hours as recommended, that you're getting 12, 14. So those are things that to keep in mind. So someone in the chat who's Mercedes, who says that they're a therapist, says, seek help if you have thoughts of hurting yourself or feelings that there is no point in living. Absolutely. So that's definitely one that definitely seek help. I'll also point out, like I mentioned, that it's not an exhaustive list. It looks different for everyone, and that this is usually over a course of at least a week or so, right? So there's definitely days where I just don't want to get out of bed, and that work is not the most exciting thing. I would rather, stay in bed, and those are great. You definitely do that every so often, or kind of listen to your body. But these are things that kind of make sure that are happening over the course of a few days or weeks, and that you know that something is different. So again, these signs can be for yourself, including or for others, including colleague, a friend, family member, if you work with students. And so those are definitely things to do that. To put it another way, right? So these are kind of grouped into. So if there's behavior changes or they're acting very differently that they usually are. So if you start noticing someone that is usually jolly, right? They're in a good mood, even if things are going horrible, they're the person that kind of light up a room. And then all of a sudden for, a few days, and not just one day, but a few days, something's going on. Then that may be a sign of distress. Motivation loss, right? So again, those are kind of how they communicate and how they present. Physical symptoms. So again, mental health sometimes manifests itself in pains, right? It's coming out of nowhere. Substance use, right? So using alcohol or other substances more than usual. A lack of interest, like I mentioned, and then as it was pointed out in the chat, if you have thoughts of death or suicide or discussing it more than usual too, right? Those are definitely signs and symptoms that make sure that you are taking care of yourself, and then in the moment that you need to seek professional help. So professional help can mean that you are scheduling with a therapist and talking to them, whether it's that same day or, scheduling it out. It may mean that you need to call the National Suicide Lifeline, right? So that's the new number is 988, right? So there's no need to remember a long number. You can just call 988, or you can also call 911, which they can either send an officer and they'll do their assessment, or they may reroute you to or share some resources there too. And I'll talk about other resources as well. 211 is another that you can call, and kind of they'll give you resources within the area, whatever area that you live here in the US. So those are ways to make sure that you're getting the help in the immediate moment. Any other thoughts or questions around getting help? Mhm. So some things to remember, especially when you start noticing signs of distress, you don't have to be an expert to notice, right? So all of these things are probably things that you've noticed in yourself, or that you've noticed in someone, a friend, family member, and that you should trust your instinct, especially it's most likely right? So you don't have to have a checklist in front of you, but if you feel that something is wrong, it may be time to seek help for yourself or for others. And then it's okay to not recognize any of the symptoms or at all, right? Or just recognize one, right? We're also, again, not trained clinicians, and so sometimes we just don't notice, or kind of we only see certain parts of people at times, right? So especially for colleagues, right, they may present themselves in a certain way, and then we just may not notice the signs, right? So that's one setting where we may not recognize any of the signs. So those are some key things to remember. I did see in the chat, and we'll go through some of the finding a therapist. So supporting someone in distress, right? So let's say you notice these signs. So here's how to have a conversation with them, right? So ensuring that you connect with them and approach them with kindness. So establishing a caring connection, right? Using I statements, and then comment on what you've observed. So, hey, Susan, I've noticed that, over the last few days, you just don't eat anymore, or you also seem kind of sad, and you don't get, you usually talk to me a lot. So what's going on? Or, usually in the work chat, saying things about how your day is going, you're not doing that. So what's going on, right? And then being able to kind of continuing that conversation and going through there. Being aware of nonverbal cues, right? So as you're having this conversation, if it's in person, especially, how are they responding to the conversation? Are they kind of shrinking and not wanting to talk about it? are they saying more with their body and then their words, right? So they may say, no, I'm fine, I'm great, but their face is saying something else, right? So being aware of those things. And then acknowledging the response is highly important, right? So as you're having this conversation, as you may be aware of it yourself, getting help is highly there's a lot of anticipation, or you may not want to disclose. So if someone is telling you that they're having a bad day, right? Thank you for telling me. I know it can be really hard to talk about mental health. And then again, as you're talking about mental health or kind of having a conversation in general, it's important that you actively listen, right? So having intentional interest. Here I have more kind of keys to active listening, right? So paying attention in the moment, right? Not being distracted, especially on your phones or whatnot. Responding appropriately. So if they're saying, I've just had a rough day, like today, I got a flat tire and then I got into work and I spilled my coffee, and then just saying, bad things happen, right? So that's not really appropriate to respond to. Providing feedback, right? So again, responding by thanking them, but also, I heard you say this, is that what you meant? And kind of giving feedback that way. Deferring judgment, right? So not really, there's no indirect way to ask if someone is um, thinking about suicide. The only way to ask about that, or if you're thinking about yourself, if are you thinking about killing yourself, or are you thinking about death, right? So that's the only way, but there is a wrong way to ask, and that's you're not thinking about doing something stupid. So again, we're deferring judgment and then listening to understand, to ensure that you're getting all the details. So again, knowing your role, right? So there's other trainings in terms of how can you help, right, that are expanded out, and we may host more later on this in the year, or can kind of refer you to some of those trainings. But knowing your role is important, right? So if you don't feel comfortable having that conversation with someone, call or find someone that does, right? So whether if it's in the workplace or family member, and there's someone else, perhaps you can get them help in the moment. Or again, you can call the 988 number and you can say, I'm here with someone and they are saying that they're experiencing these things. I don't honestly know how to have this conversation. Can you guide me through the conversation, or can you talk to them on the phone? So it's totally okay to say, I don't know how to have this conversation. Let me refer them to someone else. And then again, that you're knowing that you're a supporter and not a clinician, right? So it's similar to CPR, right? You're getting the help, you're kind of helping them get to the help that will get them to a better place. And then the conversation is the start, right? So the conversation that we're having today is around 101 level, right? So understanding mental health, understanding some of the things that may come across, but knowing your role, and kind of you're not going to, perform open heart surgery when you're doing CPR. You're just getting them making sure that they have a pulse. I know I've seen some things in the chat. So one of the things that they're saying, in worst case scenario, and this comes from Mercedes, who's a therapist. Worst case scenarios, when someone calls you and indicates that they are suicidal, you can call 911 and ask them to do a welfare check. Police officer will go to their location and ensure that they're safe. And this is especially important if they have access to guns or other firearms. Absolutely. And then, of course, make sure that you are safe, both physically and mentally, right? So if you feel that your physical safety is in danger, absolutely call 911 immediately. Or again, if you feel you're not able to do that, ensuring that you call someone that is able to. So we talked about resources. I know that's come up here. So these are some of the resources, and I just had a long list. So the JET Foundation, they work with mostly to promote and reduce suicide around teens and young adults, right? Mental Health America, and they have different resources and organizations across the nation and in different counties and in different areas. So if you go on their websites, they do have some materials in Spanish too. So I know that even as a mental health promotion professional, there's talking about mental health in Spanish can be difficult. So having some of those materials is helpful. The Trevor Project worked with young adults who are in the LGBTQ community. And so that's another resource. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, as it's mentioned here in the chat, it's a 24 hours. They do respond in English and in Spanish, and you can just call 988. There is a longer number that you can program, but I would just call 988. They're also looking to ensure that it's routed within your area and kind of a quicker response. There's a veterans crisis line, a disaster distress helpline. SAMHSA and CDC have great resources with some statistics and things. Information came from there, right? So kind of understanding the data. If you're a data person, there you can go there. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they do have a lot of resources on how to prevent suicide and having some of these longer questions around, what does suicide or what may it look like? And then, like I mentioned earlier, too, 211 is another local resource, or when you call it, it'll route you to local resources and they can get you help there. These are some things that as you go on their website, so Mental Health America, if you go on their mhanational.org, they have a screening test. They call it a mental health test, but it is a screening. So if you're thinking about something's going on, or if you just want to have a check-in with yourself, you can go on there, take a short test of, in the last few weeks, how long have you felt sad or things like that. And it can tell you that you may have depression. You may want to seek help with each other. There are some here that are in Spanish. There's 2 that are in Spanish, one for depression and anxiety. And so those are ways to kind of talk about mental health if you're interested for yourself or for others. There's a mental health resource center at the Jet Foundation, as well as for the Trevor Project. So again, if you're looking for more specialized resources or things, there's a lot of different ways. Someone in the chat earlier also asked about how do I look for a mental health professional, right? Therapist, psychiatrist, etc. And so one way to do that is Therapy for Latinx and Latinx Therapy. I know that they seem similar and it's not a typo because those are 2 different organizations and 2 different websites. So if you do go on there, you'll find that it is a database so that you can look for therapists that kind of talk the language. You can also do this on Psychology Today, but this was made for and by Latinx. And so I'll show you Latinx therapy here. So if you go on here, you can kind of start searching for states or within your area. If you need more specialized, what insurances, migration background, right? If you're undocumented, 1.5 generations, your age and other experiences. And I found that for myself, right, as I was explaining earlier, that I think in Spanish, right? So one thing that is non-negotiable for me looking for a therapist or a mental health professional is someone that speaks Spanish. And so those are ways that you can ask for help, especially there. So that's the content, and I know that it was a lot, in that it's the start of a conversation, right? Mental Health 101. So we can spend all day and quite a few lifetimes talking about different complications and complexities to mental health. But any other questions? I saw some here in the chat, and we can answer them in the last few minutes here.
Thank you. Yeah, there are quite a few questions in the chat. I wonder if we could try to get through some of them. Could you share the difference between working with a therapist versus a psychiatrist?
Yeah, so psychiatrists go to med school and they have understanding of medications, right? Psychiatric medication, so which is one way to treat some of the illnesses or mental health conditions, right? So some people have both, and so they talk to a therapist. And kind of when we think about therapy, it's psychotherapy, right, or talk therapy, right, where we talk about our feelings or kind of do different things depending on what they're trained on. But with a psychiatrist, you would have access to be able to obtain prescription drugs for some of those treatments. So again, some people work with both, some people have one or the other. It really just depends on your needs, or as you talk about things with your therapist, they may recommend pills for your depression or things like that. So that's one thing.
Thanks for sharing that. There was another question about, can you share some tips to approach someone with an addiction, either alcohol or something else? How do you approach someone that is not there? How do you help them?
And then Denise, I don't know if you could unmute yourself or add more context here. It's definitely a tough conversation. And so again, similar to kind of talking about mental health, approaching it from I statements and kind of observations, and kind of supporting them in finding the treatment or helping them find the adequate resources there. So it's definitely, I would say, a much longer topic, or a topic that we can provide you information kind of after this, and we can connect with you there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's something we see a lot. Addiction and people being in denial, and those conversations I feel are much harder to have. So yeah, I think some tips would be great. Thank you.
Thanks for asking that question. That's really powerful. There was also another question about just the concept of when you say mental health, can someone take that the wrong way? Is there other words that we can use?
Sure. So sometimes, again, emotional well-being, right, or social well-being, things like that. So again, sometimes you do have to talk about, depending on the setting or the person, again, your family members, friends, and others better than others, and so sometimes you have to bring it up indirectly, right? So you're not going to say, how are you doing mentally, or how is your mental health, and they may take it wrong because they may take it as again, some of those cultural things that come up, or I'm crazy, or they think I'm this or that. So you may need to ask it indirectly of, how's your day, or how is your day really going, or things like that. So, but I would say emotional well-being, or just how are you in general, is usually sometimes how we start filtering out some of those things that link into mental health.
I think that was pretty much everything that was in the chat as far as a question, other than wanting to know how to get in touch with you, Gustavo, to follow up. But any other questions that someone would like to unmute their microphone? We still have a few minutes, so we'll make sure that we get your questions answered.
Definitely unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Here is my email, so molinargustavo@gmail.com. Or if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you call it nowadays, that's how you can connect with me there, or on LinkedIn as well.
There is another question in the chat about helping people that you have limited contact with. If you've already kind of tried all the basics, how can you help them?
Sure. So again, I think that consistency is definitely helpful, right? So if you keep sending resources, or depending if you do have contact there, trying to get a hold of them or having a conversation, I think sometimes it's too much. Sometimes answering a phone numbers or a phone is too much in the moment, but they may answer at one point. I would also say that if it kind of depends on the situation that you're thinking of, but it may be time to also call in to, like Mercedes was saying, that if you call 911, and if you feel that someone is going through something and they need help, that it's important that you do call 911 and ask, hey, I have someone that is going through something, I haven't heard from them, or I really am scared, and I would like for them to have a welfare check, right? So they can go and assess for you. And depending where you live, I know, for example, in Colorado, there's more of a focus on social work from the police department, rather than having officers go and do it themselves. So again, and here, as Mercedes is pointing out, right, trying different communication styles, right? So they may not answer a phone call, but they may answer a text message. I know we're on WhatsApp a lot of times, especially in the Latino community, right? So sending them stickers, or sending them, knowing, again, making it known that you're there for them, even if it's somewhere. Right. Well, thank you so much. And again, if you do have more questions, you can reach out to me via email, or reach out to Susan or Carolina at Honeywell or with SHPE. But thank you so much for attending.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honeywell, for supporting and sponsoring this, and Gustavo for giving us your time and your expertise here. We are very excited to be kicking off this series. There will be more events coming, and I'm going to put in a little plug. When you close this meeting, there's going to be a post survey that's going to pop up. And so we really do want to hear your feedback and your ideas for what other kinds of content that you would like to hear in future events as we kind of build those out. And so we will be keeping you posted, but please take just a couple of minutes to give us some feedback on that survey. And again, thank you all for taking your time to talk about this really important topic as well. We hope you have a great day.
Have a nice day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.